Shalom and welcome to Temple Talk from the Temple Institute, Jerusalem, Israel. Rabbi Chaim Richman here, together with Yitzchak Reuven. Today, the 26th day of the month of Adar, 5778, March 13th, 2018. And this Shabbat, we begin a whole new adventure, the third book of the Torah, the book of Leviticus, the first parsha, Parshat Vayikra, of Sefer Vayikra. And this Shabbat is also the fourth and the last of the four special Sabbaths that precede Passover. This is called Parshat HaChodesh. It is the Sabbath wherein we will read the special additional Mafter Torah reading from Exodus 12 about how this month shall be for you the head of all the months. The beginning of the months shall it be for you, talking about Rosh Chodesh Nisan, which, by the way, actually occurs this Shabbat. It is the beginning of the new month of Nisan, a very, very extraordinary time, the beginning of time, really, and the first day, in a way, of creation, and the day that the Shekhinah rested in the Tabernacle, day of the dedication of the desert tabernacle. And Nisan, of course, is the month of our redemption, past, present, and future. In Nisan, Israel was redeemed from Egypt, and we are taught in Nisan, future redemption will occur as well. So we have lots to talk about, Yitzchak, and it may be stormy.
Lots to reminisce.
Where you live at the moment, I don't know. I understand that there is another storm on the eastern seaboard of the United States. Here in Israel, it has been
balmy.
It has actually not been a very good winter, and specifically the month of March has been very dry. We really are in a drought. We got a significant amount of rain some weeks ago, but it shouldn't have been over as soon as it seems to have been over. But in any event, come the month of Nisan, comes the spring, and that's what Nisan is really all about. Nisan, the root of which, by the way, the word comes from Nes, which means miracle. Nisan is all about rebirth, both spiritual, physical, renewal, and it's about the whole process of coming alive again. That's what Nisan is really all about. Anyway, Yitzchak, I know you want to talk about the most exciting development for us, and that is the beginning of the book of Vayikra.
Oh yeah, you and I, we are in love with Vayikra. Vayikra, which describes the inner workings of the tabernacle, which we've been reading about week after week, the details and the effort and the heart and the love that went into building the tabernacle. And now Torah comes to describe just what takes place inside those hallowed walls of the tabernacle.
So we're kind of taking a break on the chronologically because until Parshat Shmini, which actually begins in the 9th chapter of the book of Vayikra, now we are being taught instructions. Hashem called to Moshe, and Hashem spoke to him from the tent of meeting, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when a man among you brings an offering to Hashem from animals, from the cattle, or from the flock, shall you bring your offering." That's how this book and this parsha begins. And then fast forwarding to Parshat Shmini, and it was on the 8th day, which begins in chapter 9, that actually is talking about this coming Shabbat, Rosh Chodesh Nisan. It's talking about the what occurred at the dedication ceremony of the climax of the dedication ceremony, after the 7 days of inauguration, the day of Rosh Chodesh Nisan, which is described by our sages as a day that is adorned with 10 crowns. And some of the reasons for that are, for example, that is the first day of the Shekhinah dwelling amongst the people. That is the first day of the priestly service and the priestly blessings, first day that the Kohanim wore their garments. And the book of Vayikra, as you know, presents a lot of challenges to a lot of people. The timing of this week's parsha actually is so that it also coincides with the release of a video that we have up on
It's on Facebook and also on YouTube, live now from the West Texas Holy Temple Conference,
which took place in November of this past 2017, this past November. And we have been highlighting the videos of all the speakers that we had at the conference, but this particular video is the first part of a teaching that I gave on this very topic, the topic of the offerings, and understanding the significance of the offerings and what it's really all about. Because as everybody knows, the book of Vayikra is really difficult for many of us because we are so totally disconnected from the concept of the offerings in the Holy Temple, the korbonot. People have a lot of their own opinions, and there are a lot of hesitation, misconception, and it makes a lot of people very, very uncomfortable, and it makes them feel that they don't doesn't speak to them at all.
Mm-hmm. So when it doesn't speak to us, we tend to sort of mystify it or use it as an analogy, and don't talk about the actual subject itself, which are the korbonot, but to use them as a sort of a metaphor for other things.
So one of the things that we try to address in the video that can be seen on the Temple Institute's Facebook page is the eternal significance of the offerings, what it's really all about, what is the foundation of this commandment. As everybody knows, one of the most frequently asked questions about this whole topic is, well, is the plan to return to sacrifices in the soon-to-be rebuilt Holy Temple? I use that word on purpose.
Oh, I've been castigated for using that
I know
word.
You were. And this is a sore point. You're right. The word sacrifice is something that we have railed against for many, many years consistently, because it is a word that is commonly used to translate the Hebrew korban, and we feel that it misses the mark, and that more than misses the mark, it is so woefully inaccurate and inadequate and woefully kind of gives a person a totally wrong idea, because sacrifice is consistently used to describe how one has to be deprived of something and give something up for some other cause, and it always signals some sort of personal loss or deprivation. But the Hebrew concept of a korban, as we know, the Hebrew root word meaning to come close, to become involved on a deep level, to draw close to someone, is what the goal of bringing a korban is. And so this is a very amazingly different attitude and approach than we have in a Western understanding of what these offerings are all about.
And the only way we can draw closer to Hashem is not by fulfilling some prescription, but by affecting a change in ourselves via the act of the korban. And I think you used the word, Rabbi, to rectify or to realign our souls, our spiritual being. That's the dynamic that is intended by the korbonot.
So that's the thing, where this is kind of a place where we are going to be seeing some separation, some refinement, speaking about korban, meaning drawing close. We're going to see some people draw away, and we're going to see some people draw close, because it's been fun reading the first two books of the Torah. You know, it's innocuous and harmless. You know, it's some stories, and who doesn't like the creation narrative and the story of Israel and Egypt? But now that we're coming to this whole topic, people really have a tendency to become very defensive and sometimes very offensive about it. And unfortunately, we have a phenomenon in our time of people who are even called rabbis, who become very insolent, in my opinion, about this topic, and they basically explain it all away, like you said, either as metaphor, either as something that is only to teach us something on a symbolic level, or they will say that this is how it used to go because we lived in a pagan world and it was a necessary evil, but we've evolved so much since then, and nobody brings animal sacrifices anymore, and it's very, very primitive. It's basically an embarrassment to a lot of people. And that's what that whole video that we have posted, that whole talk at the conference was all about. Because my premise in that talk, and I hope people are listening now, and I hope people will watch it, because it really was a very serious and fundamental treatment of this question. And the foundation of that talk is that we're starting from the wrong perspective. We're starting from the wrong perspective, and that we have been influenced by a non-Jewish mindset, which is looking at the whole equation like that this is something that God needs, that God needs to be mollified, he needs to be somehow satisfied with our bringing this animal in our stead. It really should be us, and so we do this, and he's not going to zap us. And it's a whole idea that we are trying to get ourselves into his good graces by bringing this animal. And that, nothing could be further than the truth, because the whole idea of bringing the korban is that and first of all, as a preliminary introduction to this whole topic, all the mitzvot that we do in the Torah, everything that we're doing, is designed to elevate us and designed to bring us closer and designed to make an impact on our perception and to change us. But it's not about something that we're doing for God. He doesn't need any of this. That's not what it's all about. It's in his great compassion and his great love. He's given us a system whereby we are able to bring some divine illumination into our souls, into the world. We're able to effect a paradigm shift of consciousness so that we can focus on the reality of life, which is the presence of Hashem. And when it comes to the offerings, there's the whole idea of the program is that we are woefully, that must be like the fifth or sixth time I've used that word in this broadcast today. I don't know why. Because it's a great word. Right?
I love the word.
We are woefully confused as to our identity as being human beings. We're all mixed up. It's a mixed up confusion. And the idea of bringing the offering is that it affects a realignment, like you said earlier, of the human spirit. And the concept of bringing an animal to the altar and going through the whole process of externalizing verbally what you would call the confession of of where we have gone wrong and where we have acted like animals and where we have allowed our divine essence and our godly soul to become tarnished. By bringing the animal to the altar and realizing that Hashem is giving us an opportunity to return to him, to do teshuvah, to realize his tremendous compassion. As we pointed out many times throughout the years, one of the most beautiful teachings about the book of Leviticus, that it's so imperative to begin any study of Vayikra with, is to understand that not one time, this is a fantastic idea, not one time throughout the entire book of Leviticus, from cover to cover, from beginning to end, not one time is the name Elohim, which means God in the sense of his aspect of strictness and harsh judgment, not one time is that name ever used. Every single time that Hashem's name is mentioned in the context of the offerings in the Holy Temple, it's always the name, the ineffable name of Hashem, which is written out Yud He and Vav and He, which we call the Lord, the name. And that name is consistently associated with Hashem's love and mercy and the quality of chesed, rachamim, chesed, kindness, and rachamim, mercy. So there's something about the idea of bringing these offerings into the altar in the temple, which bespeaks a resounding message of Hashem's love to us. And this in itself is so totally the opposite of the mindset of the naysayers and the pagan world that looks at the offerings in the book of Vayikra as being the demand of a very vengeful, wrathful, savage kind of Old Testament Hashem, God, deity that is wanting to see like the slaughtering of an animal in order to bring about your rectification. You know, he won't allow that.
Assuage his anger, as it were.
Right, and that's not it. That's not what this is about at all. This is about a very fine spiritual process that goes on within a person, and that's the whole point of bringing an offering. And first of all, you know, this parsha talks about a number of types of korbonot, of offerings, and really could be divided into three categories, right? There's the olah, and that's an offering which is totally consumed on the altar. And olah can come from bakar, tzon, or oaf, right? It can come from cattle, sheep, or fowl. There is an offering called a mincha, which comes from the plant world. It comes from min hatzomeach. How do you say from
vegetation?
From vegetation,
from, grain, and
there are different types of baked offerings or fried offerings that are brought from flour and oil, that are eaten by the kohanim and by the one who brings it as well. Then there's a korban which is called shlamim, which is a peace offering, which is an expression of a person wanting to become closer to Hashem, because they're of something that they're going through, some sort of inspiration or motivation that they have. And then there are korbonot which are called chatat, and that is the sin offering. There's one that's brought by an anointed kohen. There's one that's brought by the community. If they're not sure of something, there's one that's brought by the head of a tribe or by the king, and then there's one that's brought by the individual also. Each one of these offerings has its own world of specifications, of requirements, of detail, and of significance. And we're entering into this world now, the world of Vayikra, and it's a world that makes some people uncomfortable because they don't understand how it can possibly fit in with our understanding of reality and contemporary society and everything that goes with that. And they really become very nervous and apologetic, thinking that this is where the Torah sort of becomes antiquated or something like that. And it's because they have no understanding whatsoever of what it is that's going on here, of the profound effect that the everyday experience of being in the Holy Temple is meant to have on a person, to jar a person out of his or her complacency and the blurring of lines that takes place within us today, where we really do lose sight of what it means to be a human being. And unfortunately, in our world today, you don't have to go very far to see that that's really, really what's going on. So this is what it's all been leading up to, and that is just so powerful, that idea, you know, everything. And again, like, and I know that when we speak about this, we sound defensive, really, when we are, and we sound very, you know, it's a problem that we have. It's an axe to grind, because for decades we've been teaching about these things, and we're kind of used to the reaction that a lot of people have. And it's the amazing thing is that people that really love the Torah and people that really feel like they want to have a relationship with Hashem, when we get to this part, they feel, whoa, wait a minute here. But this is the heart of the whole Torah. So we have a problem here. Well, we have a problem. We must figure this out, because, and this is what our sages say, and it's not for naught, that the book of Vayikra is the heart of the Torah, because there's 2 books in front and 2 books in behind it, and so it's the middle. And when you have a precious treasure, you keep it in the middle. You keep it well insulated, padded, protected. And you know, our sages tell us that little children when they begin their career of Torah study, and they are old enough to start studying the Chumash, the time-honored Jewish tradition is that a small child should begin studying the book of Vayikra, not the book of Genesis, not the stories about the patriarchs, not about Moshe, but here. You know why, our sages say? Because a pure soul that hasn't yet been tainted by the falsehoods of this world, let the pure come and study about purity. And that is a very, very deep idea, because what they're really saying is that children, before they are indoctrinated by all the false notions about this book and before a person becomes swayed by all sorts of agendas and all sorts of ulterior motivation, and before they know that it's not politically correct, they should come and study this, and Hashem's light should affect them.
And they'll receive it without prejudice.
Without prejudice, right.
That's the heart of the Torah. That's what it's all about, Rabbi. There's 4 things I'd like to bring up, 4 points, and I think that I'll probably be bringing them up in the second half of our show, because we're really running down the clock in the first half. But the first thing I'll bring up now, and that is, I think that the reason people feel such a disconnect from these commandments about the korbonot is because there is a disconnect. For 2,000 years, we haven't been able to perform the korbonot, and like every other commandment in Torah, it is something you do. It's something you experience. And if you couldn't experience Shabbat, it would seem like such a remote and distant idea to us.
If it was only academic, right?
Right. And really, the only way we're going to get back into fully understanding and embracing and living the korbonot is to return to the korbonot. As long as it's academic, then, it's a little icky maybe.
Yitzchak, the music is on.
The music is
so
on.
Hold that thought, and we shall be right back to Temple Talk.
Welcome back to Temple Talk. This is Yitzchak Reuven with Rabbi Chaim Richman here in Jerusalem, Israel. Today is the 26th day of the month of Adar, 5778, the 13th of March 2018. This coming Shabbat, we begin the book of Vayikra, Leviticus. It is also Shabbat Parshat Chodesh, in which we read about Rosh Chodesh and Nisan being the first of the months. The first commandment that Israel received while still in Egypt, just before leaving, the commandment to mark the new month, and by coincidence or not, it also happens to be that this Shabbat is Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the beginning of the Hebrew calendar, the beginning of time, and I'd like to mention, Rabbi, I said before there were 4 points I'd like to mention. If you're hearing a drilling in the wall, we're hearing it also. It's not your TV set. Don't touch that dial.
We have not been taken over by alien invaders, but we are dealing with some serious drilling next door. Sorry about that.
We'll proceed. Hopefully we'll be able to make ourselves heard over the din. Was that a response to what I said? Okay, 4 points, Rabbi. I just want to throw them out there so then we can talk about them. One, which we haven't mentioned yet, Vayikra starts, and I think the first verse can be translated as God spoke to Moshe.
He called to Moshe.
God called Moshe, and God said to Moshe.
Exactly.
Or it just says he called to Moshe, and God said.
Even more exactly.
Right. So Vayikra.
So the name of Hashem is hidden
right.
in the first part of the verse. It says he called to Moshe.
And we don't even know what God said.
Right.
So we know that God called to Moshe.
Well, presumably he called him by name. He called him.
Right.
It was like an invitation. But the thing is, what we do know, it was the preface. It was the preliminary. It was the initial contact before he, in other words, he needed to call him before he spoke to him.
Right. And I think that I want to take this somewhere, and I think that is how we all have to be Moshe for a second, because I think in order to understand what we've been talking about this whole time, in order to get into what Vayikra has to share with us and teach us, we have to drop our pretenses, and we have to allow this intimacy with God to take place, and it's sort of a beyond the intellect type of moment where there's a voice that's almost a whisper, and we have to really hearken to it in order to hear it. And what takes place after that, the entire book of Vayikra, Leviticus, is really the full version, the explication of that unheard gesture of communication. Meaning, what I'm trying to say is the korbonot, the offerings, the more we try to analyze and intellectualize them, the more distant they become. Again, ultimately it's an experiential process that we can only really guess at unless we're doing them.
The bottom line is that it's a commandment.
It's a commandment.
So the idea is, throughout the book of Exodus, at the time of the revelation at Sinai, we were talking about this incredible expression, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will hear, which is understood, which was the response of Am Yisrael, of the Jewish people at Mount Sinai when God gave them the Torah. Their response was unequivocal. It was, we're going to do this, and whether or not we understand, because of course there are many mitzvot in the Torah that we do not understand the reason for, like the Parah Adumah, for example, which is a chok, and they were saying, we are ready to be your servants, whether or not it appeals to us. And that's the whole deal here with the book of Vayikra, is that it doesn't appeal to a lot of people. It turns a lot of people off. But do we do the mitzvot on a pick and choose level? Are we basically doing this for our own? It's not something that we are actually supposed to be choosing.
Right. Another point I want to make, which is a follow-up to really what you just said, if we recall, when God first commanded Israel to make a tabernacle, Asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham, make for me the mikdash, make for me the sanctuary.
Li l'shmira, she says, when in that verse in 25:8, where he says, and you shall make for me a sanctuary. So Rashi says, what does it mean, li? Make for me, for my name.
For my name, because I want it. Why does God want this tabernacle so much? Why does Torah devote half of the book of Exodus to the planning and to the building and to the accounting and the dedication of the Mishkan tabernacle? Why is it so important to God? Because it's for us. It's for His children. It's for us to bring korbonot, in order for us to draw closer, in order for us to recalibrate our spiritual balance,
our humanity,
and perfect ourselves and keep ourselves in line. It's all for us. That's why it's so important to God. I think that's also another extremely significant point to bear in mind all throughout any discussion of the offerings. The other thing that I want to say is, as we said before, the dedication, the inauguration of the tabernacle was on the 1st of Nisan. Of course, Nisan is the month of our liberation, and our liberation is not complete without the tabernacle, without the service in the tabernacle without the offerings. The offerings, the korbonot, are part of our freedom, our liberation, as human beings, our reaching our full potential as human beings. You can't separate. It's not. It wasn't just a happenstance of the calendar year that 1 year after the commandment to start to mark the months with the month of Nisan, that 1 year later, the tabernacle was ready to be inaugurated and put into use. It's there for a reason. It's on that date for a reason.
And one of the themes of the month of Nisan is renewal and rebirth and starting over again.
Mm-hmm.
And so it works out very well that we're beginning this book now as well, the same Shabbat, because, of course, central to the Passover theme is the fact that on the 10th day of the month of Nisan, the people of Israel were commanded to bring the sheep and to prepare it for the Passover offering, where basically they took the god of Egypt and slaughtered it before their eyes, and their response was absolutely stunned. They didn't make a move against them. It's the total act of political incorrectness and rebellion against the mindset of idolatry of the world that Israel is commanded to do. This is exactly what our
mandate.
Our whole mandate is. And the thing is, one of the things that I talked about at that conference that I hope people will watch, I think the first one is up now. It's called Understanding the Offerings Part 1. And then I think it's on YouTube as well, in addition to the Temple Israel Facebook page. But the principle is that, in addition to that, which we mentioned earlier, that this is all for us. It's all to impart a deep and profound, life-changing lesson in our mentality. Everything that we do in the Torah, all the mitzvot, and all the service in the Holy Temple, the way that we serve in Hashem, the way that we are serving Him, and the way that we're pleasing to Him is by trying to reconnect with our lost humanity and trying to ever elevate ourselves so that we become more and more refined as people. And one of the things that we really understand from the service in the Holy Temple that involves bringing animals to the altar is the fact that this is a perpetual dynamic which constantly needs to be addressed in the life of man. The fact that we are people with a dual nature. We have a spiritual part of us. We have the godly soul, which is pulling us in one direction, and we have our gross physicality, which is pulling us in another direction altogether, and we walk a tightrope. And that is the basis of all the bad decisions that we make and all the negative things that we might do. And that's the purpose of the service in the Holy Temple, it's to make us aware of all of this and to bring us closer to our goal of being people that are committed to a godly way of life. But the idea is this is not going away. In other words, those naysayers who say, well, in those days, there were we were surrounded by all sorts of primitive peoples that were bringing animals, and that's why God told us to bring animals as well. Let it be for Him, and all sorts of ideas. The idea is, I don't see that anything's changed in the world today, and you don't have to look very far than your local news to see what people are capable of, and the levels that we've sunk to as far as our own identification as people. And so this is a constantly recurring theme in the life of man, to become a man, to shine forth with the light of what it means to be a human being, that Hashem created man in His own image, but we have this blurring. We have this blurring where we get very mixed up as far as what we are. And the concept of bringing an animal as an offering is a process of differentiation and refinement, whereby the human potential, the godly soul, the man that was created in God's image, is separated and released from the raw base animal nature within a person, and the one who goes through this experience of bringing the offering to the altar has a real wake-up of where he has been and how he has been using his time and his energy. And it's a total rededication of his spirit to the purpose for which he was created, which is to be a man.
I think there's even a hint of that in the first verses of Leviticus, where it says, if a man among you brings an offering of a cattle or sheep or fowl, a man, Adam. They could have used another word, but Adam, which is man created in God's image, and man, the being that, the potential that we are always aspiring to reach in our lives.
There's an intersection of a lot of things here that are going on with Shabbat, Parshat Vayikra, the first Torah portion of the book of Leviticus, and Shabbat being Rosh Chodesh Nisan, because Rosh Chodesh Nisan is the anniversary of the establishment of the Tabernacle, but it's more than that, and thus it's the first day of the divine service of the offerings. Right, we're going to be reading about the offerings on the actual anniversary of the day that the offerings began. But more than that, it's the whole concept of how Nisan itself, the month of Nisan, why is it the source of renewal? Why is it springtime? Why is it the time of redemption? It's because Nisan is really a validation of creation altogether, and we hope to have a video up very very soon about the whole concept of Rosh Chodesh Nisan. It should be up by the beginning of next week. But the idea is that the whole reason God created the world was to have a presence here, because creation is, the universe existence is infinite, and yet we have this expression, very important lesson that our sages teach us, that God wanted an abode in this world. He wanted a dwelling place in this world. He wanted to be welcomed by man, like you pointed out recently. When it came to the Garden of Eden, so man was banished from the Garden of Eden. That experiment didn't work out. The concept of the tabernacle, and later to become the Holy Temple, is man welcoming God into this world, which affects like this tikkun of the Eitz Hadat in the Garden of Eden. So the idea is Nisan validates creation because it is an expression of Hashem's joy of being in this world, which was his plan all along, to have a dwelling place, to be wanted man to welcome him in.
Why it's the first of the months and the beginning of time, because without God in the world, there's no time. There's no real existence.
So the Midrash Tanchuma states that when the day that the Mishkan was erected, which was Rosh Chodesh Nisan, which was kind of like Hashem's dream come true, because he wanted to be welcomed into the world, that the world was perfected on that day and firmed up. And the exact quotation is, Hashem always wanted to have a place down below as he does above, and when this happened, his will was fulfilled and the universe was filled with joy. And this is the secret meaning of the verse in Psalms 96:11. The heavens will rejoice and the earth will be glad, which actually spells out Yismechu Hashamayim v'Tagel Haaretz. Yud Hey and Vav Hey is the Kabbalistic permutation, according to the Arizal, that shines forth the form of Hashem's name of the month of Nisan, which is the only month of the 12 months that the actual 4 letters are in their proper order, because this is the perfection of creation this month.
One last thing I'd like to bring up. We often say the Holy Temple, it's not about a building, it's not about architecture, it's not about stones. I think we need to say the same thing about the offerings. It's not about the burning flesh, pardon the expression. It's not about the smoke that rises up. It's about the interaction, it's about the action, and it's about the relationship between man and God, and quite frankly, the animal as well, which is part of God's creation. It's also a significant player.
It's about the motivation, the intention, and it's about the drama of what goes through a person's mind, understanding what life is all about and what it isn't all about, and how short it is. And it's a very powerful experience
It's
for
a very,
a person
very,
to go
very
through.
finely choreographed experience, and all the details that we learn that might seem so dry in the text in Leviticus are instructions of how to bring this whole process to life and how to make it work, how to make it effective, how to make it meaningful. It's like I just said, it's choreography. It's not. There's nothing here that is unaccounted for, and every action that's taken, also with the person who brings the offering, and of course with the Kohen who's performing the offering, and with every aspect of the courtyard and the altar where the offering's taking place. It's all part of a very, very, very finely tuned dance, activity, purpose-filled action, which we're commanded to do. Each separate offering with a slightly different tempo to it, different beat to it, different dance to it, but each one filled with meaning for man.
Yitzchak, can I go someplace else altogether?
Yeah, have a good time.
You know, the White House is due to release its much-anticipated peace plan.
This really is a different place, yeah.
Not really, because the secret of peace is the Holy Temple.
Oh.
So that's how I see it. Now, the United Nations Human Rights Commission issued a report, and they decided that they announced that settlements are a war crime. Israeli settlement activity in the West Bank and East Jerusalem is a war crime, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Zaid Ra'ad al-Hussein, charged in a report you're laughing, he issued last week. Yes, he happens to be a Jordanian prince. Do you have a problem with that?
No problem whatsoever.
So this is very problematic, this report, accusing Israel of war crimes for settlements. And the main problem that I have with it, Yitzchak, is that this is our land. And this whole deal about the two-state solution, the reason that it got any steam whatsoever and that it was ever considered is because of the consideration that people have that Israel is occupying Palestinian land. This is a wrongful statement. This is our land, and it's been our land for more than 3,000 years. And these areas of the land of Israel, ironically, carry our identity the deepest than any other place. These are the places of the patriarchs and the matriarchs. And so whatever the program is that when it's released, it's all meaningless, because the main issue here is that we need to address the fact that this is our land. We need to do that unabashedly and clearly. The government of Israel needs to be unequivocal and not ambivalent about the fact that these so-called territories are the heartland of the land of Israel, and they always were. And the atmosphere in which this, the continued abusive, obsessive, demonic, obsessive nature of the United Nations with Israel, the atmosphere in which this was able to be spawned is the fact that we are not addressing this clearly enough, that not only are settlements not a war crime, how could we commit a war crime by building homes for our children in our ancestral land? This whole thing is so totally backwards. And I think actually, yes, Yitzchak, I think this concept dovetails very beautifully with the book of Vayikra and God's calling to Moshe and calling to all of Israel to bring the offerings in the Holy Temple, the house of prayer for all people, and the illusion is over in the Holy Temple. That's what it said recently. The only place where life is real and where we are actually not playing make-believe is the Holy Temple. And this whole deal here with the UN and with the two-state solution, and it's all this nonsense is make-believe. The Torah is calling us to be real, calling Moshe, and Hashem called to Moshe. This is about being real. And either we admit that or not, and how much more so when it comes to the Temple Mount. And, having allowed a foreign agent, the Waqf, the Jordanian Waqf, to administer the Temple Mount is that's the war crime that we committed against ourselves, because this is the house of Hashem. And it's all one. It's all one. And it's perfect timing for the month of Nisan, establishment of the Tabernacle, Hashem's joy, and it's perfect timing for the book of Vayikra. So let's get real. That's what this is all about.
Well, Rabbi, you leave me with just enough time to say I stand corrected, and to wish everybody a very wonderful Rosh Chodesh Nisan this coming Shabbat. And thanks for being with us here on Temple Talk.